So we're going to begin with an opening statement of why you are running for office. And I'm going to start with Ruby.
2 minutes? 2 minutes.
Good evening, Dolphin Democrats. My name is Ruby Lenore Green, and I am your candidate for Broward County Public Defender. I currently work at the Public Defender's Office. I've been at this office for going on 8 years, but I started at the Public Defender's Office in Jacksonville, Duval. I am from Broward County. I am a proud mother of a 13-year-old. And there are several things that had happened to me in my life that had led me into public service. By the 2nd grade, I was the sole signer of documents for my household. That's because my mom couldn't read or write, and she had to leave school to pick strawberries and beans in the fields. By 13, I was sold by my own cousin for drugs. And by 15, I was told that I wasn't going to be anything, and I thought that McDonald's was going to be the highlight of my life. But I became a public defender because I saw that there was a need for people like me that grew up in situations in which I grew up, for them to have a chance. And I'm going to give them that chance at the Broward County Public Defender's Office. I've been at the Public Defender's Office working as a supervisor and a chief, and I noticed that we need changes in our criminal justice system right now. We need changes, and those changes are not only for the people that come into our office, but also our attorneys and our staff. They need someone to fight for them. And I'm going to be that person. So on August 18th of this year, you're going to elect the first Black woman in the history of this state to Broward County Public Defender. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Gordon Weekes. I am your Executive Chief Assistant Public Defender. Thank you, Dolphin Democrats, for having this forum, not debate, so we can tell you a little bit about ourselves and our platform. You know, when I graduated from law school didn't prepare me for a very stark reality. And that was when I walked into courtrooms and I saw that a majority of people that were handcuffed looked just like me. And that was a reality that I had to endure when I first started off in the juvenile division. What I pledged at that very moment when I walked in those courtrooms, that one day I would have enough experience, enough courage, enough understanding of the law to try to affect change to what I saw back then. When I started, we led the state of Florida in the number of juveniles that were being arrested. And I'm running on my platform. When I ran the juvenile division, we worked very hard with the school board, with the sheriff's office, with the state attorney's office as well, to make sure we put in real change. We implemented a civil citation program that was the first all throughout the South Florida area. We implemented the Promise program that reduced the number of children that were being arrested out of our schools. We made efforts to decrease the schoolhouse to the jailhouse pipeline. And under my leadership, we reduced from being the highest folks with arrests for juveniles in Broward County to the second to the bottom. I'm running on that platform. I'm running on standing strong, and I'm running to make sure that we represent and make sure that each and every person that finds themselves in that criminal justice system gets a fair shake, that makes sure that they are being heard and make sure they're being represented and represented properly. I am proud of the work that we've done under the leadership of Help Me Howard, who is our elected public defender, and I'm proud of the work that I've done, being second in charge at our office and leading us forward. So on those issues, for what we have done and our continued support of this community, I ask you for your support for Public Defender August 18th. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Tom Lynch. I'm also running for Public Defender. I was born and raised in Broward County. After law school, I was very lucky. I was hired by the Public Defender. I stayed there for 4 years, and I loved it. It was great. And the main reason I'm running for Public Defender is I truly believe that people that can't afford an attorney deserve great attorneys. And that's important. And we need a change in the Public Defender's Office. I was there for 4 years. I tried 90 jury trials, including 12 death penalty cases by myself. Now the supervisors, the administration, for whatever reason, public defenders are trial lawyers. For whatever reason, the supervisors and the chiefs don't have caseload. I don't understand that. You can't be a trial lawyer if you're not trying cases. And if elected, if I'm fortunate enough to be elected, I'm going to have every supervisor and every chief trying cases. That's the name of the game. The other issue, another issue is, and maybe you saw it in the newspaper this week again, about a year ago, actually over a year ago, the administration contacted the clerk's office and said, you owe us a lot of money and we deserve it and we want an audit. That was about a year, maybe 14 months ago, that letter was sent. No follow-up, there was no follow-up whatsoever. What I've been saying since that time is, if I'm elected, I'm going to give the clerk 60 days to have an audit, and if that doesn't come through, the $12.5 million will be sued for. So the public defender's office has the money to represent those people that need that representation. Another thing, training. Training is extremely important. I'm very fortunate to say that a lot of people have already told me, the people that trained me, that they're willing to train the public defenders, the new ones that are coming in. So, and I'm out of time.
Thank you. So I do want to also add this. I began my career as a public defender, so this is near and dear to my heart to have you all here. I think public defenders do incredible work. They do incredible work, and it's hard work, and so my hat is off for you running. Thank you. And your service. So the first question will be, if you were elected, what would be the 3 key changes you would make at the public defender's office? We'll go back to it. 1 minute.
I would make sure that we have a social worker at the office. Currently, we need our clients to have better access to mental health treatment, to jobs, to housing, to reduce that revolving door, to substance abuse treatment, to reduce that revolving door. I'm also going to revamp our training. Our training at the office at this point in time is inadequate. We have attorneys that are representing people who don't even have any trial experience, and some of their clients are facing life in prison. Would you rather have a warm body, or would you actually rather have someone who knows what they're doing, who's representing your loved ones? I would also make sure that we have someone who's going to every single legislative session. We need someone to fight for funding for us as well. We need to also be in the courtrooms making sure that we fight for against sentencing disparities. We have people who have been charged with burglaries recently for taking mangoes out of a tree. There are several issues that I would like to fight for this office, and in August of 18th, give me that chance. Thank you.
You know, one of the first issues that we need to recognize is the practice of law is changing, and we need to implement some technological changes to keep up with the way that the world is going. So one of the things that we're going to implement, and we've already started rolling this out, is a text notification system to ensure that we are properly communicating with our clients. It is something that has revolutionized the practice of law all throughout the nation, and we're going to put that in place in our office, so to make sure that our clients not only know about their upcoming court dates, but it reduces the recidivism, and it reduces the fact that folks miss court and they get bench warrants for missing court. We're also going to put together outstanding training. We have some of the best attorneys in the nation that come to dedicate their lives to public service. And you know, we have our Chief Assistant of Training that's in the audience, Lorena Masterigo, and she is going to go all around the nation and recruit folks that do not have the enormous student debt that causes them to be overburdened as young public defenders. What we're also going to do, I understand.
Thank you. Actually, I gave the 3 answers already. Get the money from the clerk, $12.5 million could really help out. Number 2, train the lawyers. It's so important to train lawyers. And as you heard today, the training is inadequate, and I agree. I was a judge for 32 years. There were some great public defenders, and there were some public defenders that were not trained. And I think it's very important. And you know what? The people that have been in that office for 15 and 20 years that are not trying cases, they can do some training as well, but they also have to try some cases. When you walk in, you were a public defender. I loved every day of it. I hope you did. And when I walked in that courtroom, I said, let's go try this case. That's not happening now, and I think it's very important. So those are the three things that I've already discussed.
Thank you. Diversionary courts are important because they help the offender remedy their behavior and avoid a criminal conviction. We have some in Broward County, like veteran, homeless, and mental health. Are there any other courts you think we need in Broward County? Would that increase the budget of the office? It says 1 minute, give a little more leeway.
We do need more diversionary courts in our office. It will not increase our budget at all. And I'm saying this because we don't have the diversionary courts. It's the state attorney's office that actually have the diversionary courts. So we normally try and work with state attorney offices in order to see if they would be able to create a diversionary court. We currently also have, along with that list, community court. We have drug court as well. And did you say mental health court? We have mental health court. I do believe that we need a DUI diversionary court, a misdemeanor diversionary court. When I was chief of misdemeanor, I did attempt to seek out the state attorney, the chief state attorney at misdemeanor at that time to see if she would help create a diversionary court. And at the time, it wasn't something that she was willing to do. So I hope that'll change this year. Thank you.
You know, as the public defender, we have to lead. We cannot always rely on the state attorney. There are two very, very important courts that we need to implement in Broward County. One is a human trafficking court. That has impacted our community in ways that we really can't appreciate. You know, many, many years back when I ran the juvenile division, I saw how human trafficking affected young people. I saw the scourge and how they were indoctrinated into that particular lifestyle. We have advocated and we have demanded the state attorney to recognize the importance of human trafficking, and they have acquiesced. And very shortly they will be introducing a human trafficking court to allow people to move forward in their lives and not have the scars that are attached when they enter into the criminal justice system because they were victims of human trafficking. That is a very important court. Additionally, we're working with the Broward County College to develop a very novel new court that is going to use college education as a diversionary means to get folks tools and supports so they do not re-enter the criminal justice system. We have to think outside of the box. We have to recognize where we can get people help and assistance in the criminal justice system so they don't go deeper into the system. And one of the things we all recognize is economics is important. Access to jobs is important. And what better way to do that by then offering education opportunities, trade school opportunities, certificate program opportunities so folks can get jobs. And we will see that happen with I'm the Public Defender.
Thank you. You know, last night I went to University of Fort Lauderdale, and I saw Roger DeHart. He was the guest speaker. Judge Holmes is the president of that university. And Roger, that's his thing. He is great. He's the gentleman that walked from the Broward County Courthouse to the steps in Washington, D.C. Last summer, he walked from San Francisco to San Diego. The guy's amazing. He knows more about this area than anyone that I've ever encountered. He's a court deputy, so he's very familiar with how the court system works. I would tap into him, and I think he'd do a great job. So I think that would be a very good program and a possible, we have to get the chief judge to sign on, but I think he would. He's very receptive to those kind of things. You know, our drug court is very good. Our mental health court is excellent, but it could use some new work. And also there's the veterans court, which Judge Merrigan's doing a great job with, and that's my thoughts.
It is no secret that the current relationship between the public defender and state attorney is strained. If you are elected, how important is that relationship to you? And how will you ensure that there is a good working relationship between the two offices? You have 1 minute.
It's all about communication. In any relationship, you have to communicate. And I don't think that at this present time that they're doing it the way that it should be done. But if you actually effectively communicate, and we as line attorneys, the line attorneys that are actually in the courtrooms, we know that when you're in the courtroom with a state attorney, sometimes you're gonna have an adversarial relationship. But there are gonna be times you're gonna fight, and there are gonna be times where you're gonna come together and say, hey, let's work this out. And a lot of people don't know this, but sometimes judges don't have all the power in which we think that they have. There are mandatory minimums that judges cannot waive. But guess who gets to waive those mandatory minimums? State attorneys. They get to waive them. And it's very important that at some point we come together, and at some point we can just take ourselves and just lay everything down on the table and come together and go come together and make sure that we talk about the underlying issues that other people have so that we can get this situated. People should not be in custody for mental illness if they have all of these substance abuse issues. We need to work together at some points in times, and of course, there are times that we're going to have to fight, especially in trial. Thank you.
I think that's a very important question because the criminal justice system is adversarial by design. And it's adversarial by design because justice is had in the middle when you have a very aggressive state attorney trying to put forth the facts to represent victims, but you also have an equally skilled defense attorney that's pointing out the issues with the evidence, pointing out the biases and the reasons why people may testify in the way that they're testifying. And in the middle, you find justice. But you have to maintain that very adversarial relationship. If you are willing to sell your client down the river because you want to have good working relationship with the state attorney, how is that going to equal justice? People in this community have never had a benefit from the criminal justice system because they acquiesce to the state. I'm not saying that you have to be 100% aggressive all the time. In my administration, I pledge to you that I will have a once a month sit down face-to-face conversation with the state attorney, with the sheriff, and any other local law enforcement chief of police so we can flesh through the issues that need to be fleshed through. For example, implementing more diversionary programs, implementing more civil citation, getting them to buy into implicit buying training for law enforcement officers to make sure that people are treated fairly in this community. You have to do that with the one-on-one conversation. But when we are in the courtroom and I am representing a client, we will make sure that those clients' issues are heard first because that is where justice is had.
Okay, great, thank you. You know, public defenders are trial lawyers, they're street fighters. And when they're in court, they're fighting. There's no one selling anyone down the river. That doesn't happen. With a good public defender, well-trained public defender, supervisors with trials that actually they take the cases to trial, these are street fighters. But you know what? We don't need the public defender to be at war with every single administration, whether it be the sheriff, the state attorney, and that's what's going on now. It's absolutely unnecessary. Like I said, I was a judge for 32 years. I was lucky enough to get elected and lucky enough that no one ran against me for 32 years. And you know what's very important? That everyone has to get along on certain issues. And there's no reason to have an absolute war with the police. The public defender doesn't have to have a war with the police, doesn't have to have a war with the state attorney's office, the probation. That's not necessary. You go in and fight hard in court, and you work things out outside of court, and it's very important.
I'm going to actually ask you to stay up here because you kind of went into one of our next questions.
I do that
We
all
have,
the time.
that's okay. You talked about the relationship with other offices, so we put down here, the relationships between the Public Defender's Office and the offices of the State Attorney, Broward Sheriff, and Supervisor of Elections are very important. Briefly comment on the current status of those relationships and what you would change. So we've talked about the State Attorney,
Sure.
but you talked about other offices. You have 1 minute.
Okay, 1 minute. It's a lot of work in 1 minute, but I better start talking if you want to hear my answer. The state attorney and the public defender presently are at war. It's absolutely unnecessary. I've known almost everyone in both offices for a real long time. There's no need for that. You know, there has to be communication. There has to be working together on certain programs. The clerk's office, the only problem that the PD's office has had with the clerk's office is there's no audit. The clerk's office, according to articles that I read in some statisticians, owes the public defender $12.5 million. You know how many lawyers that could be hired for that and do a great job? It's very important. I don't think there's a war between the clerk and the public defender's office, although remarkably, over a year ago, the clerk suggested a sit-down meeting to try and work it out, and you know what happened? Nothing. And the sheriff, you know, the same situation. There's, you know, if I'm public defender, I'm going to have training sessions in the public defender's office instead of press conferences. I think it's very important that the people that are involved in the system work together.
I also think that it's important for the people of all of those elected offices work together. At some point in time, I do believe that we don't have a system right now where we're cooperating with each other, and I think that can change a lot of things. We can get a lot of programs going. We can have a lot of other issues resolved if we just went and spoke with people, pick up the phone, talk to people. I mean, right now, all we get are letters or emails. And what is that gonna do? You know, that's great for pen pals. That's great if you wanna say, hi, Betsy, this is how you're doing. I'm great, okay? But we are litigators, okay? We need to go into these facilities, if it's a jail, and say, what you doing? We need to go to the state attorney's office and say, hey, what you doing? We need to go to the clerk's office and say, hey, you know, we just had this audit. We need this $12.8 million or we're gonna sue or something. You know, these are the things that need to be done. We need to come together. We need to know what's going on with each other at everyone's respective places. The police departments, the clerk's office, the supervisor of elections office. If we know every single thing that's going on, then we can figure out some of the issues that we're having, and it's just been so poorly done. And I feel like we're behind. We're in the 21st century, you know? Thank you.
You know, I just want to be clear on some things. You know, with respect to the clerk's office, we took a lot of effort to make sure that we were diligent in the issues that we were raising. We raised and we identified that there has been a shortcoming, a shortfall of funds that should have been paid to our office through the collection of the clerk. And then we doubled down and hired an independent auditor to go out and verify that claim. That process didn't take 5 minutes. It took a significant amount of time. And then we pressed the clerk and put that on the clerk's forefront that this is an issue that needs to be resolved, and it needs to be resolved immediately. You can have a lot of conversations about, you know, let's have a kumbaya, let's all get together. But let me tell you, when you, your family, your loved one finds themselves in trouble, and you go get an attorney to represent their interests because that's your friend, your family, or your loved one, you don't want to have no kumbaya with the person that's trying to put them in jail. You want to make sure that person's interests are only going to be serving the person that you love, you care about, or that is you. And that is the promise that we will have as public defenders. It's not that we won't talk to the state. We will. but we're going to put our clients' interests, the community's interests, first. You talked about what are the relationship with the sheriffs. When we go into jails and we find that police officers are mistreating people, not only do we document that, because that's what a good attorney should do, is document it in writing, but we follow it up and we shed light on it. We make sure that the community is aware of it, and we put it out so everyone can see, and because you put light on misgivings, that's how you get change. That is the Civil Rights March, that's the Civil Rights Movement, and that's what we're going to continue to do to make sure that we have fairness, equality, and proper treatment in our criminal justice system. We're not just going to talk the talk. We walk the walk every single day.
All right.
So I just spoke a moment ago about this being Black History Month. I think this question is timely. What type of mandatory diversity and inclusion practices will you implement, and how would you do this?
The practices themselves, well, I think that's adequate training as well. There's a lot of good people that can teach all of us something. And I think it's important. Judges went to training courses for that, and I think the Public Defender's Office can do that as well. I think every office should. And you know what? What's as important is jury selection. You have to get the right jurors. You have to get the right mix. You have to know what you're doing. And I think that's important. So I think the training is important. And going back 1 second, I think I have another 30 seconds. Going back 1 second, you know, when I was in the criminal division, the day one, I said, I want a meeting in my office with all the state attorneys, all the public defenders, all the probation officers, the clerks, everyone. And I sat there and I said, I need suggestions. We've got to get this docket under control. And you know what? I think we did. And the problem was, you get to the holidays and you want to...
I'm going to cut you off only because the question was about diversity and inclusion.
Okay, sorry.
Okay. So Ruby, if you'll come up,
Yes.
1 minute on diversity and inclusion.
I think that we need training. We can invite people in on a monthly basis. We do have what's called a Florida Law Weekly, where we get continuing legal education on a monthly basis. We need someone to come in and do diversity training. I also believe that we should have people in our offices that are members of clubs. I personally am a member of the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, the Broward County chapter. I've also worked with Trey Johns and Valencia on the Dignity Steering Committee for New Florida Majority. These are issues that I think that we can address by making sure that we have people in places in which we're talking about right now, such as this club. Thank you.
You know, this club asks the right questions, and you ask the right questions because it's a very important issue. Diversity training is one of the paramount issues that needs to be dealt with in the criminal justice system. We have, under this administration, demanded that police agencies engage in implicit bias training. We asked that they engage in sensitivity training, but we took it another step. We weren't only going to ask that folks on the outside engage in it. We did it ourselves. I brought in an implicit bias trainer, and we trained all of the administrative staff in implicit bias training, because we're not going to only talk the talk, we're going to walk the walk. And we are going to make sure that our office is reflective and understanding and mindful of the important issues of implicit bias and how it permeates the criminal justice system, and make sure people don't feel that they get a fair shake. So that is what we are not going to do. That's what we did, and that's what we're going to continue to do in this administration.
What is the current budget to run the Public Defender's Office? Is it sufficient? If not, what would you need more funding for?
It's not sufficient. The funds, for the most part, come from the state. Some funds come from the county, but for the most part, it comes from the state. The state was kind enough, I say that because the legislature isn't very kind to public defenders or state attorneys, but they were kind enough last year to make a minimum raise, so when you walk into that public defender's office or the state attorney's office, you get at least $50,000. You start at $50,000, which is substantially higher. But you know, I was very pleased with that. But the problem is, you have people that have been in the offices for a year, 2 years that are not making that 50. Those people don't get the 50. So there's changes, and going back to the clerk's office, I'll take that $12.5 million, and we'll see what we can do with it.
The current budget at our office is around $23 million. It's not sufficient. We need someone in Tallahassee that's going to fight for the attorneys and the staff to have money. Money to go to the jails when they need to. Money to feed their children. I personally have had to take on 2 or 3 jobs while working at the public defender's office, meaning that I would have to go to the jails, go to court, take depositions, and then at the end of the day, go to a night job. That's the situation that's happening at the public defender's office as we speak. It's not sufficient. We don't have anyone in Tallahassee fighting for us, fighting for funding. But as public defender, I'm going to do that. I'm going to make sure the staff and the attorneys are going to make sure that they are going to be able to feed their families. And not only that, it's going to be better for the people in which we represent. We can't adequately represent people if we can't actually find the time to go see them at the jail because we're tired because we're working 2 jobs. Thank you.
You know, I have to make sure that we're being clear in the record when we're out here speaking to the community. You know, there's been some conversation that we do not have any social workers in our office. I'm not sure if people understand. We have a social worker in our office, and we're going to increase the uses of social workers because we recognize for the last 10 to 15 years when we've had them, how important they are to the administration of justice. Make sure that they help find services for folks, jobs for folks. When folks are having mental health crises, we reach out to them to make sure we shepherd them through the Baker Act process. I'm not sure about the folks that are running and whether they really understand what we do in this office, but we have those resources and we're going to build on them. Most importantly, what else are we going to do? We're going to make sure that our attorneys are taken care of. The attorneys are underpaid, but they work really hard. And one of the things that is debilitating for attorneys is that they have a huge amount of student loan debt. But one thing that they have that's super valuable, that's the experience they have and accumulated as a public defender. And then private firms from all across this community recognize the value of those attorneys. So I'm very proud that those attorneys then move on and they're all throughout this community carrying on the PD tradition. But what we have to do is recruit individuals that will be able to sustain that debt, but also work through this process. Thank you.
Actually, Gordon, I'll keep you up here for a moment. Our next question is, what would you do to better address low-level drug offenses?
Great question. You know, low-level drug offenses, oftentimes, let's go back. You know, there was a war on drugs in this community. We all remember that. And that war on drugs really was a war on black and brown and poor communities because they were running through those communities, kicking in doors and arresting folks all throughout Broward County. How do we address those low-level offenses? We got to recognize that treatment is the issue. We've had some very important historical notes that we can never forget. We saw how this criminal justice system treated folks that were suffering with drugs and crack and cocaine. But we've now learned that opioids are equally as addictive. And we have learned the lesson that we have to treat our way out of that problem and not incarcerate our way out of that problem. You have to have a strong public defender to stand up to police officers, chiefs of police, judges, and prosecutors to get them to understand that there are different ways to handle people's addiction. Putting handcuffs and throwing them in cages is not going to solve the problem. We have to make sure we never go back to the way we dealt with crack, and we take the lessons we learned with opioid addiction and move them forward. Thank you.
Drug addiction is a terrible situation. Treatment is the only way to take care of it. Not incarcerating people. And very interestingly, Judge Tobin Singer, she was a street fighting public defender down in Dade County, and now she is head of our drug court. And she really does a good job. There's certain restrictions. You can't have 14 times where nothing happens if someone falls off the wagon or tests positive. When I was a circuit court judge, I think I was the only one in the entire courthouse that instead of setting a no bond if there's a positive marijuana on a violation of probation, I set $500 bond, because that person shouldn't be in jail because they're smoking marijuana. And the drug court is doing great, and I think it's important to work with that.
There wasn't a war on drugs. There is a war on drugs right now as we speak. And our criminal justice system has been inadequate for treating people with drug addiction. And when I say that, because I am in the courtroom every single day and I get to see what goes on. The problem is that we also have drug programs that if you can't pay, you are going to be shut out. Or if you can't pay, they're going to tell the judge and then you're going to be back in jail because you violated some condition of that program. We need to revamp our criminal justice system. And with me as the Broward County Public Defender, it's going to happen. Thank you.
So the next question hones in on education. I think part of the job of any public defender or anybody holding office is to educate our voting public. So typically, people see public defenders' offices plea out a high percentage of cases. Is that the case in Broward County? And if so, how do you explain that to people? We'll start with Tom. Go ahead.
Sure. Certainly, most cases are resolved in plea negotiations. That's just how the system works. And that's not necessarily bad, because most of these cases, many of these cases, except for the very serious violent cases, can be disposed of pretty quickly. You can also divert a case from a circuit criminal division to drug court or to mental health court or both. And, but I think that's how it should work.
There are three things that can happen when you go to court if you have a case. Besides your attorney working up, I'm not talking about an attorney working up your case and you're getting the case dismissed. I'm not talking about the fact that the state attorney ends up no-crossing your case or any situation that deals with that. But you normally have the options of pleading, open pleading to the judge, or you can go to trial. Now, people are afraid of the unknown because you know what you're going to get when you plead, right? You know what it is. But people are afraid to open to the judge because they don't know what the judge is going to do. And people are afraid to go to trial because they don't know what those 6 people are going to do to their lives. So yes, people normally plead. I believe that the rate of pleading is 93%. It's a pretty high rate because you really want to know what it is that you're getting. And sometimes you don't like it. You might not like the sentence that you're agreeing to, but you're afraid to do something else. Thank you.
You know, I want to put this in perspective for you. And you're right, the job of the public defender is to educate the community, be accessible to community, be a stakeholder in the community. But for historical purposes, the previous administration, as public defender, used to have a very barbaric practice called meet, greet, and plea. And that's let's think about that. When someone was arrested, they would sit in jail. Their rent would become due, car note would become due. Husband, wife, girlfriend would say, hey, I need you out because I need you working. And they would meet their public defender, greet their public defender, be conveyed a plea offer, and then plead the case out. This administration put a stop to that practice because we recognized that that was not effective representation of your client. You had to develop a relationship. You had to hear them out. You had to find out what was going on in their lives so you could effectively advise them as to whether they should accept that plea. Listen, the state is going to offer pleas, but your client needs to have counsel, needs to have support to know what the impact of that decision is going to have on their lives, whether they're going to have their home become subject to being removed because now they can't live because they're a convicted felon in that certain apartment, whether their job is now going to become affected because now they can't keep certain employment. That is what we implemented to make sure that we represented our clients to the fullest extent. You have to make sure you have a strong public defender to recognize the real world impacts of this job, because it is so serious for the individuals that are in court having to make life and death decisions. Thank you.
This is our last question. This is another education question. So I'll say this. Many people say as a public defender, you get paid by the state, just as the state attorney does, just as the judge does, just as officers do. And therefore, it makes it difficult to believe that public defenders are working for them. How would you respond to that when speaking to the public or to anyone coming to you for your services as a PD?
Can I be first on this one? Great. Public defenders are really misunderstood, to be frank with you. The general public, much of the general public doesn't even know what a public defender does. And when they find out what a public defender does, they don't necessarily appreciate what a good public defender is doing, giving a real hard fight and a defense. And I think it's very important. So many clients think that you being a public defender is paid by the state and the state attorney is, so you got a deal cooking. That's not the case. I think a strong public defender with a strong trial statistics, and instead of supervisors not trying cases, I think that would put a lot of these problems to rest. Thank you.
Public defenders are misunderstood. In fact, we get called public pretenders, or you're not a real attorney, I'm on a real lawyer. This is what happens every single day, and this is clients that don't know you from Adam, and we completely understand, because a lot of people, and once you're in the jail, you have those jailhouse lawyers that will say, hey, this is what happens at the public defender's office, and so they all get scared. And for some reason, and you've seen movies about public defenders, and they always say, oh my goodness, public defenders, you just go ahead and plead them out. They always think that about public defenders. And yes, we do get paid by the state of Florida, but we do not work for the state attorney's office. That's the difference. And we do need to make sure that we are telling our clients, and we are adequately and zealously advocating for our clients, because that's the only way that I've seen that they've been so when are you going to become a real lawyer, because you're great. And they say that all the time, and you're like, oh, but I have my law license. I've had it for years. But it's just going to take for you to be in the courtroom advocating for your clients, so that they can see that you are there for them and not there just chumming it up with the state. And so that's important for their representation and what they're going to do for the rest of their life.
I'm not sure of the experiences that other candidates have had in their practice as public defender. I have always been welcomed by my clients when I come to represent them, because they see in me the fight that they're going to get that helps them through this process. They see in me the patience that they're going to get to help them understand this process. They see in me that I'm not currying favor with the other side, that their interest is paramount to what I am trying to put forward. They see in me that I'm willing to stand up to a judge and call them out when they step across the line. They see in me the ability to stand up to police officers when they mistreat people in the community. So every single day when I walk into a courtroom, they're happy that I'm there as their public defender. They're happy that they have someone that's going to be a voice for them. They're not calling any public pretenders. They're saying, can I have Mr. Weekes on my case? Can you please come down and talk to me? Can you call? Can you write? These are the experience you build with experience in the community. I've been doing this for a long time. My reputation is out in the community. I encourage each and every one of you to go to my website, look in my archives, see the issues that I've stood up for this community, and you will understand why when I walk into a courtroom, folks want me and this office to be on their case, because they know we're going to stand up for this community.
And so now you have 1 minute for your closing.
1 minute. Okay. I love your vote. I think it's important. I'll work hard for you as a public defender. I loved every minute being a public defender. I loved every minute being a judge. When Help Me Howard decided not to run, I said, count me in, I'm coming back. And that's what I'm going to do. I'll work hard. The office absolutely needs changes. They need training. They need that money from the clerk's office. They need the money from the legislature. And you know what? When my son left the public defender's office, because he was lucky enough to work as a public defender as well, when he left, 40 lawyers left that year. There's a problem when you got 40 lawyers leaving an office. Nothing's going real well if you got 40 lawyers leaving the office. I promise that I will work hard. I promise that every supervisor and every single lawyer in that office will be a trial lawyer and try cases. I don't know what trial lawyers do if they don't have any cases to try. I really don't. And I think it's very important. And the training, I already told you, I'll do my best. Thank you.
I'm the only person that you're going to see on the ballot that's walking the walk. I'm the only person that you're going to see on the ballot that the clients are going to say they want me. Why? Because I'm the only person that's in the courtrooms day in and day out that's actually a public defender in the trenches going to the jails. I have a caseload. Even as an administrator, had a caseload, helping the attorneys, going to court with them, training them, taking depositions, filing motions, advocating in court zealously for our clients. The only one on the ballot, and you can check my website, voterubygreen.com, and you're going to see everything that I've been able to do as well. So, on August of 18th, make sure you make the right choice, because we do need a zealous advocate. We cannot continue to give fighting positions to people who are not fighting. So vote Ruby Green for change to be seen. Thank you.
You know, it's clear why I am running for public defender is because this is what I've done and this is what I will continue to do to protect this community. There is by no strange imagination that they call it the public defender's office, because we are entrusted with an awesome responsibility, not only to protect the community for the people that we represent and make sure that they are properly represented in court, but in doing that, we protect the entire community to make sure that justice is served and that the system works correctly. By making sure when police officers step across the line, and I've said that, but you know what that means, because you've all seen the videos where police officers had people handcuffed and punched them in the face while they were inside a hospital. You've all seen the videos where police officers choked gentlemen while they're holding their child in their hands and calling them boy. You've all seen those issues, but if it wasn't for a strong public defender to call that out, to put a check on that power, that abuse will be condoned and it will be running rampant through this community. You have to have a strong public defender. That is what I did, that's what I'll continue to do, and I will fight for each and every one of you in this room every single day. Thank you.
So we're asking that you all stay seated. We do need to finish up the rest of our meeting. It won't take long, but I do want to thank you. Earlier, this room was a little bit more packed.
There's still 55 people in
Yeah,
there.
no, but I want to make a point here. We will get bored and tired and think we have something better to do. I assure you, if you are charged and you need an attorney and you can't afford an attorney, nothing would be more important than what just happened here. So I say that, so I want to thank you to everyone that stayed. But we have to take this seriously. I will binge watch Netflix, watch a show that's an hour long, 13 episodes. I can sit here in a room and hear about folks that are gonna represent me. So thank you again, but that's why we asked for you to stay.
All right, the candidates, if you don't mind just taking a seat, please. Thank you so much for participating. Okay.